Thank you all participants and our esteemed expert for giving the talk. Before the starting of the talk, I want to state some few key points of our expert. Dr. G.S. Javed is an analog IC design manager with 12 plus years of experience in design, layout, and characterization of analog circuits. Since 2020, he is the technical and executive head in analog at Intel India. He received his MS and PhD degree from Indian Institute of Science, ISC Bangalore in 2016. He worked on low power integrated instrumentation circuits for sensing application. In 2015, he founded King Consultants Education to work on design thinking and expertise learning. He also is an advisor guide for PhD aspirants. From 2016 to 2020, he lead the team on high-speed circuits and manage a team of 10 plus designers at Terminus Circuit Private Limited. From 2012 to 2016, he was a senior research fellow at ISC Bangalore on integrated sensor interface. He has over 20 peer-reviewed journals and IEEE conference publications in his credit. He is also an active speaker and motivator on analog circuit design, high-speed interface design, design thinking, entrepreneurship, and research methodology, and technical writing, and the spirit of entrepreneurship. He is a senior member of the IEEE 2016 and was inducted into the IEEE Eta Kappa Nu, the Honor Society of IEEE for Academic Excellence. I am very happy to lead the proceeding to Dr. Javed. Dr. Javed, sir, please accept my and start the presentation, sir. I hope that the participant will get a better knowledge about the analog circuit and the topic. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Just a moment, attending to some office work. Give me a moment.
No issue, sir.
Great, thank you. Let me know when you're all able to see the screen. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Majumdar, for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. But may I know how many faculty members are there today in this session? Because I didn't get to see what is the count.
Sir, till now it is 27. It will be increasing. Means previous one it was 112. So okay, it was increasing little bit. It takes time, sir. After lunch.
Great. Okay. I think I'll get started, and by the time it'll take another 5 minutes for me to reach the content. I will just try and introduce my research work and some of the other things that I've been doing, so that it gives some time for the participants to join.
Okay,
so,
sir.
This will be the rough outline. I will talk about my myself and my research which I've done. I will also talk about some of the online tutoring on Udemy MOOC courses that I offer. We will go through an energy harvesting overview. We will look at a specific RF energy harvesting work. We will look at one particular example for RFID sensors, typically great for IoT applications. We will do an impedance matching understanding. Then I will talk about my recent work on multi-band, multi-stage rectifier design. We will have a look at the results, conclusion, and then we'll follow up with the Q&A session. But in the chance that some of you want to know what are the questions you want to do, kindly ask it in the chat box. I will take it up after the energy harvesting overview section ends. Okay, before I start RF energy harvesting, you can take it up. Please ask the questions in the chat box, and we will take a quick Q&A session in between. So a quick overview of my research. So these are the various hats that I wear, and I enjoy wearing it. So apart from being a person who admires nature and spends more time there, I also am an educationist who on every weekend deals with teaching school students science and math, and in some ways problem solving. Apart from that, I enjoy doing volunteering with the IEEE. I have been an IEEE member for over 12 years, and I am a senior member and also have served in the Exicom of the Bangalore section for about 4 years right now. I'm also an entrepreneur. I started my company King Consultants Education in 2015, where I teach about design thinking, experiential learning, and problem solving. So in our from 2015 to 2020, I have delivered talks, almost 75 plus talks, plus trained about 6,000 engineers within Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. So reason why this leadership is important and teaching is important, because you learn from nature, and once you learn from nature, it is our responsibility as people who are educated to ensure that the nature's learnings are reaching out to the common man and to the younger generations who have the curiosity. So it is our time to increase the curiosity in the people. While learning about all these online teaching in the year 2020, I came across 7 courses which I have designed for analog circuit design. I start with basics of analog circuit design, amplifier design, then practical design and simulation tips for ADC, LDO, and VGR. Then I did full-blown courses on lab-on-chip design for attofarad cap measurements, then an LDO circuit design and analysis, an intuitive approach, circuit design for high-speed serial links, and ADC circuit design. So in the link below, you can go and check. I have over 450 students enrolled in my course, and very recently I have been given 4-star rating. I'm trying to better that in the near time to come. So this is how the base of the course builds, right from basic in the bottom to the advanced. So we try to build a strong foundation so that the building above gets more stronger and more efficient. You can diversify from top. A quick overview of the 5 projects which I have done before or I'm doing currently. This is part of my PhD work, where we designed and understood integrated instrumentation circuits for biomedical diagnosis. This was the main PhD work, where we did arrays for gas sensing, biosensing, and pressure sensing, along with flow and humidity sensing. Okay, here you have the silicon outputs that you see, silicon die shots which are present. Second project was trying to do an RF testing method using electrothermal characterization. So in GIST, what we try and do is find out how much loss is there in a particular circuit and try and correlate with what is the active power in them, and then bring out. So this we had very close correlation with what is the work which we guys try to do. Next, we had on-chip temperature measurements done for power amplifiers, LNAs, where we were able to identify the center frequency, 3 dB bandwidth, and power added efficiency, or PAE. We could also do frequency stability based analysis for a DLL. So this was most beneficial as a BIST or an RF BIST application or built-in self-test. The most recent projects which I've been working on are the high-speed SerDes, in where we're doing SerDes work from 1.25 Gbps to about 40 Gbps. And most of this recent works have come out from this particular work. And we see most of them, how do you see TX equalization, RX equalization, post-processing, channel understanding, what is the I margin that we get, how do you maintain that. We worked on a lot of high-speed SerDes deliverables. Another project which we did was high-frequency phase lock loops, where frequency generation from 1.25 gigahertz all the way to 20 gigahertz was generated, and you could generate multiple combs of these frequencies and then use it. My most recent work and one which I'm enjoying as a designer are looking for agriculture, IoT in agriculture, where there is a high social importance. Top two important works that I'm looking at precision farming and storage and granary. Some works which I have already done are soil management and water management, and these have been very helpful at introducing it at school level and intermediate college level, and this has been a great benefit for a large masses of students to bringing them into understanding electronics. So let me start off with energy harvesting. What is energy harvesting? I think I have taken about 6 minutes time for people. So let us start. So what is energy harvesting? When you gather energy from the natural ambient environment and convert into usable electrical energy. So there's a lot of things around us. Sound, light, solar, wind, water. Like they say Panchabhutam in the world, the Sanskrit word, you have all the 5 elements of nature from which you can harvest energy. There are different ways to do them, and we will look at them gradually. What are the importance of energy harvesting? You can reduce the dependence on batteries or cells. There is a need for a continuous source of energy for electronic systems, and these are great for self-powered, remotely operated sensor networks. What are the advantages that you're looking at? Self-sustainable. Each of these energy harvesting, if you can generate and design well, are extremely self-sustainable, and because they are looking at some of the perennial items in the nature, you can always use and reuse them. It allows mobility and promotes autonomy. They are readily available and a very good source of green and clean energy. There is no carbon footprint on most of them. It eliminates the option of battery replacement, and good amount of these harvesting sources can be deployed in inaccessible areas. So what are the potential energy harvesters? Dr. Y.K. Tan from NES Singapore generated this cumulatively beneficial diagram where he showed what are the various ways in which you could use. Let me start with the bottom left. It goes with electromagnetic generator, electrostatic generator, and piezoelectric element. These are all forming of the mechanical vibration techniques. Then there is an ocean wave generator which uses AC linear generator, and piezoelectric you can also use it for pressure based. Next there are the AC rotary generators or your windmills where you can use it for compressed gases or steam, wind and hydroelectricity. So your turbine technology is all AC rotary generator. Then there is chemical reaction or the biochemical reaction which happens in our human body, and the biochemical reactions which happen all around the world in nature. Next we have the thermoelectric generator where you use the thermal gradient on a surface or a difference in the thermal values to do that. So the common effect is called Seebeck effect. Then there is this autophagus structure power conversion where you try and absorb something and then consume it, burn it, and then you produce it. So that is why you call burning. So it is autophagus, meaning you eat it, and the power combustion, after burning you use it. So what are these? These are your diesel vehicles, automobiles. All these convert something into thermal, and thermal into thermopressure, and then further into electric. So this is a generator. So your pistons are a best example. Next, photovoltaic cell. Photovoltaic cells can be done from predominantly natural sources, but a lot of technology has come in where you could use artificial lighting to ensure that you get some photovoltaic activity or you get voltaic activity from those any light. So photovoltaic does not necessarily mean solar. So with that aspect, people went into research and found you could do it for specific wavelengths of light, and these wavelengths of light can be extracted using artificial bulbs or any band gap lighting effect. Next one is the antenna or a rectenna. Rectenna is a rectified antenna where we will look at RF energy harvesting. where you are basically looking at microwave radiation absorption, and you're looking at ambient radio frequency waves. We will look into more detail in this block. Next, we have the induction coil. So induction coil is alternating the magnetic field where you get from the power transmission lines. And you're also looking at wireless power transfer where you're looking at strongly coupled magnetic resonances. So induction coils are also right now great wireless power transfer mechanisms. So we are able to see that on phones. We are able to see that on electric vehicles. So we are looking at an abundant source of energy. So what is the principal mode of operation? How do we do that? All these from the sources, and once the source is done, you will take the source and you will do energy or a power conditioning. What does conditioning mean? Making it suitable for usage. That is the most broad application or broad definition. We will look into how each of them work below. Next, we have energy storage. You need to store the energy in some form and then deliver it to the electrical load whenever there is a requirement. So what are the potential applications we are looking at? You can see a lot of these applications coming from industrial automation, for example, for machine health and predictive maintenance, lifestyle management of human beings, where you're looking at body area networks, fitness trackers like Fitbit, Google Fit, etc. Structural health monitoring, where you're looking at sensor-based checks for buildings, bridges, structures, and more relevant to Meghalaya would be the mountainous structures and how you can understand the strength, structure, and the health of those components without affecting them majorly. Another thing is wireless charging for electronic devices. These are mostly beneficial when there are natural disasters occurring and you don't have electric supply reaching you. You could use a lot of wireless charging directly from these applications. And finally, the cumulative effect of all of these is the Internet of Things, where each side you need, you're looking for a power source. These energy harvesters would act like a good power source. But yes, these should be ultra low power sources, and these are great applications to have a look at. So how does a typical energy harvesting system look like? Energy harvesting looks like on the extreme left, you find environmental energy, solar, thermal, vibration, etc., PV, and these are all the sources. Once you have these sources, these are like you need to sense them. So you sense them using a energy harvester, harvest them. So take in whatever is available internally and then create and then supply it inside. How do you supply it inside? You use an AC to DC converter or a DC to DC converter. And this DC to DC converter allows you to get a high DC voltage and then you store this energy. Now, the energy storage and the DC-DC conversion can typically kept in a loop or in a controlled loop where you sense what is the amount of energy storage, how you replenish it, and get the work done. So this control activity along with the DC-DC converter basically is called your power management or power conditioning circuit. And in this segment, you will see a lot of innovation and a lot of design challenges coming up. And this is the direction in most people have gone through. Now, energy storage also has become a great activity and a great research area. After the upcoming market of electric vehicles, a lot of battery storage systems, energy storage systems have come into the picture, and various cell mechanisms have come in, right from lithium ion to lithium polymer to the lead acid batteries which were used prior to all our UPSs, etc. We are looking at dry batteries and wet batteries, and you're going to use either a combination or just individually each of them to utilize all the energy harvested in your system, right? So now let us focus on RF energy. Okay, so it was hardly 15 minutes, so let me take some questions here if there are any, and then we'll proceed from here. You can unmute yourself and ask those questions. Okay, looks if no questions, I will proceed further. Now let us discuss RF energy harvesting. So for RF energy to be harvested, you should know What is the energy that is available right now? So what are the energy availables? If you look at the power spectra of the Indian microwave power spectrum or the global power spectrum, you would find 4 to 5 main buckets of RF energy available. The first one is around the 500 megahertz band, which is for digital TV broadcasting. Next one is the 800 to 900 GSM band. The other one is the 1800 to 1900 GSM band. Next comes the 2.1 to 2.2 3G system, and finally the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi system. So these are all the sources that you're looking at, and if you need to harvest, the best way to do it is stay close to some of these cellular phone stations and radiating sources, which are your transmitting stations. And your wireless routers, RFID readers, mobile phones, and RF radios are all your receiving stations. So you will typically be using these receiver blocks or receiver look like circuit elements to absorb this energy and then convert them to usable electrical energy. Now, before we go that, the first thing you need to really understand is a very old equation which gives an understanding. This was typically developed for radars to find out what is the received power from a radar and what is the expected transmitter power to find out what is the range in which the radar can operate. But a similar application or analogy, if you use it, can be used for your wireless routers and mobile phone receivers. On the left hand side, you will see there is a transmitter and a receiver separated by a distance dr. The power transmitted is PTX and the power received is PRX. And the gain factor of the TX and the RX receivers are given as GTX and GRX. So the Friis equation or the Friis formula for the received power at the antenna, at the receiving antenna, is given as a product of the transmitted power multiplied by the gain factor of the received transmitter over the 4 pi r, or what you could say the spherical presence of the radius of, or the distance between the two subjects or the two objects. So here r shows the distance between the antenna, and this is actually the squared. The reason it is squared is the power depreciates or the power falls down significantly because the air in the system absorbs some of it or it dissipates a lot of it into that. And this is directly dependent on what is the frequency of the system. So 4 pi r by lambda whole square is the actual equation which looks at what is the impact. So the amount of power dissipated is directly dependent on the lambda. So when the lambda increases, frequency falls. That means as the frequency increases, the rate of falling of power follows faster. That is why you look at, you can receive FM stations within a city. You can receive your Bluetooth radio within say 10 meters, but your shortwave radios you can even hear from Russia. So people who have a habit of listening to shortwave radios, you can still receive to some of the farthest stations. And even the AM radios can go all the way up to Ceylon and Burma, or which are called Sri Lanka and Myanmar currently. So these are some of the age-old communication system concepts that we will utilize in while doing energy harvesting. To understand energy harvesting, we need to understand two things. One, the concept is you need to receive maximum power. And to receive maximum power, we will follow a very simple and a very old concept of maximum power point tracking. What does that mean? There is a maximum power point at which your system operates at, and how much power it tracks in the receiver and how much power it dissipates or transmits to the transmitter. So we can use an adaptable tracking mechanism or a fixed maximum power point tracking mechanism to understand and make the matching networks for the antenna so that you can have maximum power. So how do you have a maximum power here? When the total power input at the system is the impedance Zin is completely resistive without any reactive power into it, then you will have maximum power transmission. So the condition for maximum power ensures that your reactive power is 0. or your reactive power is as close to zero as possible. And for that, you will try and use a programmable matching network to ensure that you program and zone out or tune out all the reactive power. The antenna can be modeled as a wire voltage source V-AND in series with R and or the antenna resistance in series. So that is the antenna model we're looking at. Now, let me call your attention to the graph below, or the signal graph below, which shows how much actual load is absorbed or available from the P available. So P available stands for the total available power at the receiver. Now, at the receiver, you find that most of the power will be matched, but some amount of power will get reflected. So that is considered as a loss. Further, when we go from the matched source, you go into the load. When you do rectification, there is some amount of rectification loss that happens, and then it further passes through as load. So effectively, the total amount of power received or harvested, which is called P load, over the P available, gives us the efficiency of energy harvesting. So this energy of harvesting can be done by using, assuming that the power input or the impedance at the input of the matching network is given as Zin equal to Rn plus Jxin, where Zin is the impedance, Rn is the resistance, and Xin is the reactance. Our aim is to try and reduce this Xin to 0. Now this can be further sent into the rectifier, and the rectifier effective impedance can be again looked at. Impedance of the rectifier is equal to resistance minus Jx, or the minus the reactance value. Now this final value will get cumulatively present at V out DC, which acts as the supply or the load current or the load supply to the end. And when the load is not present, all the energy can be stored into an energy storage device. So this is how the energy gets harvested in an RF system, and you understand where is the efficiency. Now, if you look at what are the places that you need to do, or things that you need to change to ensure you get high efficiency, those are: try and make the P reflected P close as to 0 and the rectifier loss to be as close to 0. So to make these two 0, you need to tweak, design, and understand the new challenges that the programmable matching networks and the multi-stage rectifiers give, and how do you get the appropriate inputs. But one thing you need to understand that if the load required is much more than the available load, then you need to duty cycle. What is duty cycle? Duty cycle is the amount of on time or the active time as compared to the harvest time. In this particular case, the duty cycle on time is given as activated load time, and the total amount of time wherein the system is working is harvest plus active load. So the duty cycle can be described as active load over harvest time plus active load. So in this case, what happens is the upper limit of the VDDH, or the useful storage area, or the voltage, depends on what is the storage capacitor present. Storage capacitor acts like an energy storing system, which stores half the where the amount of energy stored in the capacitor is given by half C store VDDH minus VDDL whole square. So V square is a typical understanding of what is the power requirement. So the power requirement, whatever the power that is present in the lower limit to the upper limit, is where the total power can be used, and power integrated over time gives you the energy. So the area under the graph, that is the between the red triangular like value graph and the two black lines, gives the area under the graph, and this is the total energy present in the system at here. So the triangular spaces is all where that you can harvest or accumulate the energy, and the places where there is a sharp discharge is where the load operation happens and the energy is released. So this is the upper edge energy, and this is the baseline energy. Baseline is given as half C store VDDL whole square. So but important point that you need to consider with regards to what is the storage value, storage cap. So the smaller the storage value, higher the VDD edge. Okay, so but you will see a higher leak also, and efficiency also is lower. In essence, what we say is, if the capacitance is smaller, this triangle will be more centered across one. And when the capacitor is almost zero, all the peak energy will be presented centered across one particular instance. So instead of having it one particular instance, we will have it spread out so that we can use it and store it for a longer duration.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. We cannot hear you, sir.
Sir, voice is not audible, sir.
Looks like there was some internet connectivity problem. I am back. Hope I am audible now again.
Yes, audible,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes. Okay. Let me go back to sharing the screen. Yeah, whenever you find my voice not audible, just let me know. Okay, let me continue. We will talk about the system architecture for RFID sensors. Let me go back one or two. So did you all miss anything? I spoke about duty cycled operation. Was this understood? Hello, participants. A yes or no would help.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, you understood. So we will go to the next section, which is the RFID harvesting, energy harvesting for RFID sensors. A quick introduction about RFID measurement sensors and how it works. So in this particular RFID sensors, we first decided on how to use RF energy harvesting. Use something called an RF to DC conversion and generate the supply voltage, which is VDD. And this particular block, power supply, used to supply power to the analog block, which contained an oscillator, a buffer, and a spike generator. The spike generator was used to create a filter, where the filter had sensor information and the ID information, and these were sent to the RF modulation block, and through backscatter they were sent out. So this is a subject, the topic where we could use RFID, and you could use in the RFID patches with this one, and utilize that same platform to add some more sensors onto it. So in this particular case, we gave a multi-collision avoidance sensor mechanism, and also on time interval felt RFID system, where each of the filter that we use a different timestamp and a different time instance to send the data, and this allowed us to multiplex multiple sensors in the same band. So this was the system architecture for the RFID sensors. Now let us focus on the energy harvesting portion. So this is one work which we presented at IEEE CONECCT 2020, where we used a multi-band, multi-stage rectifier and implemented this in the 130 nanometer technology. So as we understood that to generate the energy harvesting system, we had an antenna. We used the programmable matching networks to it to ensure that we get maximum power as V in and V in plus and V in minus, and these came out as differential input. This differential input was sent into a multi-stage rectifier. We will look at how each unit rectifier was used, and how an output voltage was generated, and what is the maximum voltage that was kept. So a look at the proposed RF harvesting. So in the RF energy harvesting, the first thing that you need to understand is the impedance matching. Impedance matching is critical for maximum power transfer, And the way we try to impedance is the antenna that we have had a modeling done, our antenna, and the V antenna had kept along with what is the amount of voltage source that it can absorb. And that antenna was tuned for 50 ohms. Now, most of the systems on electronic systems that you have are not actually at 50 ohm. You generally keep them at a higher resistance value, and then you tune it down using LC filters or CLC match filters to do an impedance matching and get it function. So using these tuned lumped and distributed components of L and C, these were converted to use rectifier. Now this particular rectifier, if you see, the input of the rectifier also had a tuning capability or a programmability where we could tune and program depending upon what is the amount of input power that we have. For high power systems, we would a high power path. For low power systems, we would use a low power path. And that you would convert to equivalent voltage or a current source. And then you could drive a capacitive load or a resistive and a capacitive load together. So in this particular circuit, we will talk about a programmable narrowband impedance matching circuit for a capacitive load only. So the way we did was an impedance matching circuit using L1, C2 and C1 was constructed, and this was used to tune for the various frequencies that we were targeting. Now, why did we need tuning? The reason we need tuning was because we were targeting for 2 bands of operation, or typically in general it would be called multi-band operation. So in this particular case, since we are working at 900 and the 1900 megahertz, we used it. So can any of the participants recollect and tell me what telecom band does this 900 and 1900 work at? Can you please unmute and tell me what band they work on? And what generation of telecommunication do they operate on? 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G? Can you unmute and give me a test? Since it's all faculty members, it's nice to see asking the questions to the faculty, so that hoping they would respond. Dr. Majumdar, we don't have active participants. Hello? Am I even audible? Okay. There is absolute radio silence. Let me stop sharing and see if anybody could respond.
Sir,
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry,
Okay.
sir. Actually, here some microphone issue is there. Hello.
Yeah. Okay.
Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yes, sir. What was the question?
The question was, it is for all the participants if they would like to see. So what I want to say is 900 megahertz and 1900 megahertz are 2 frequency ranges. Now, what telephone band do they correspond to, and what networking generation do they correspond to?
Okay, sir. Okay. I think the participant can give the answer in the chat box.
Okay, great. Can you read out them? Because if I open the chat box, the share will go away.
Yes, sir. Still waiting, sir. Sir, you can continue, sir.
You can no, because if I just keep on going and a monologue, people will start sleeping after lunch. So this is one way of trying to keep them awake.
Sir, let's see for 1-2 minutes. Any participant give the answer.
Most of them are faculty, right? So the expectation is they should know the answer.
Sir, the faculty are from different.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Yes, sir.
Okay, looks like I in fact touched upon this in a few slides back, so that's a hint.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Exactly.
Okay, looks like I'm not going to get an answer. Let me proceed. So this is basically
you can give the answer, sir. I think this time the participant will be able to listen.
okay. So this particular frequency band is our GSM band.
One has given GSM 900 2G. 900
GSM
megahertz
900.
use 2G.
That is the correct answer. Yes.
Yes, sir.
900 GSM, 1900 GSM is your regular quad band of frequencies operating at the second generation. That is the correct answer. Great. Look, okay, some people are active.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
so we needed two frequencies to operate, right? So what we tried to do was, if you had looked at the graph earlier, we showed what is the frequency or what is the peaks that we observe in the power energy spectrum. And we found that the maximum power is at 900 megahertz and the next power is at 1900 megahertz. So we wanted to use these two power sources and see how much energy that we could harvest. And that particular equivalent information for the best possible tuning was received with using these components L1, C1, and what are the S11 and Zin for that. And for the 900 megahertz band, we used a 0.78 microhenry, whereas for 1900 megahertz band, we used 0.5 microhenry. The capacitance value we used was 3.63 picofarad, whereas for a 1900 we used 0.44 picofarad. This ensured that the insertion loss that we were looking at was kept under 36 dB for both. So it is minus 40 dB for 900 megahertz and minus 36 dB for 1900 megahertz. Using these components of designs for L1, C1 and C2, which were fixed and operational, now we can find out what is the total antenna voltage that we receive. And the antenna voltage at the antenna input is given as square root of 8 times the available power multiplied by the series antenna resistance. So that would give what is the voltage that we get here. So once this value is received, how do you do? You need to rectify them. So the rectifier was designed using diodes. So cascade of diodes using a differential input, and we had cross-coupled MOS transistors or back-to-back diode connected devices so that you could reduce the on resistance in the device using low VT devices, have low reverse leakage current so that you don't lose out on the value of output, and the capacitors at the output provided DC coupling for the rectifier such that there is no DC bias maintenance difference between the two, and the total output power can be given. So this is a unit cell. This unit cell may not give a complete power supply. You might get about 100 millivolt or 150 millivolt or at max 200 millivolt depending on the kind of devices you use. Now using these devices, you need to cascade them to ensure that what is the final output value you get. Right? So while going to the next step, let me just go back and show how we had why do we need, how do we absorb the power from both these bands? The best way to absorb both these bands is as follows. So what we do is the input or the rectifier or the antenna has got two paths. One is a high power path in the rectifier and another is a low power path in the rectifier. So what we do is when the power from both the bands are connected, then you can use the high power path. When either of them are used, then you can use a low power output path to find out what is the value, compare and then rectify. And for doing all of that, we need to have a voltage reference and a comparator which would help in bringing out the output. And this output is also used, and some amount of this output power is used for the differential amplifier or a comparator to do the comparison, turn on and turn off the switches SW3, SW2 and SW1 depending on what is the switches of mode of operation that you do. So once you know how to do it, if a simpler way of understanding this would be as follows. So if you have two sources and each one having two switches, where each one of the switch inputs would be connected to the corresponding antenna devices, where you have the 900 antenna and you have the 1900 antenna present over here. So depending upon these switches, now you could either connect them to the same source and pass it off to the rectifier, right? Now this would be the way you would do it. So these switches from which you can tune what are the input that you can absorb is coming from the antenna, where it is here. This is from the antenna portion. And here is your output that you goes off at the load side. So in between is where your reference and the rectifier parts are done and you would cover. Now if you look at what are the number of power supplies that you have on the rectifier and what are the details of this particular block, we will see in the upcoming slide. So in the upcoming slide, we are looking at two parts. One is the voltage generation part and another is the power tracking part. The upper side is a voltage generation, the lower side is a power tracking. So what do we do in the voltage generation track? We cascade 5 of these units, which typically give us about 200 millivolt each. We cascade each one of them and ensure that the final output that we reach is about 1 volt. So since we know that as the voltages gets added up in series, each of these generating about 200 millivolt of output gets added up and allows us to reach almost 1 volt of output voltage. Whereas when you're looking at operating in a low power path, you're only doing a low power tracking, where you need information enough whether you would like to switch to power generation or stay in power tracking. So this allows us to keep a track of the high power and low power track in multi-stage designs and in multi-band designs. Suppose you're just working in one of the bands, you could use one power, but the time taken or the number of generations per unit cell would be much smaller. In this particular case, we used to have about 200 millivolt per unit cell, right? Now, if the 200 millivolt was not there and the unit cell was only about 150, then I would need one extra device placed in cascade. So instead of having 5, I would go forward with 6 devices and get that done. So you can stage the number of multi-stages that are needed and get enough value at the output. Mind you, you cannot stack this infinitely and get infinite amount of voltage. There is a limit beyond which there is no efficient power addition happening, right? So the number for this particular design was taken to be at around 1 voltage, and the amount of current and voltage design was taken care of. We'll give you a quick results of how it happened. So this is the power conversion efficiency. So the power conversion efficiency is given as the DC power received at the output or the load power, and the power available or P in power is what you would get. So this PDC is your load power finally received at the output, and P in is your input power. So in this particular graph, where we have input power on the x-axis and the power conversion efficiency PCE on the y-axis for both the powers of low power and high power. Now, in essence, to find out what is the power, we will take what is the final VDC output. In this particular case is 1 volt, and what is the RL value, the load resistance that is kept. So in this case, it was kept to 100 ohms and 1 kilo ohms, and find out what is the total power efficiency we get. Now, in this particular graph, we are measuring only one path at a time. So when I mean one path at a time, it is either the tracking power or in the high power. And even in the high power, we have got only the 1900 megahertz and 900 megahertz bands that we could operate. If you could see the peaks of both these maximum efficiency coming at around 20% and at about 27% come for these low and high power. And if you could see in the low power, the scaling is much higher and the power conversion efficiency is always above 10% in most of the case. Whereas for the input power for the high power, we find that it is only about 70% of the time over 10% efficiency. So that means at almost 75% of the design or the power is lost. And if you recollect in the beginning of the waveform, beginning of this presentation, I had said where are the potential areas where the amount of power that can be loss that can be reduced is shown are: 1, when you are having the rectification loss; 2, when you are having any reflection happening at the system, right after the antenna. If you look at, so these are the two places where a lot of signal conditioning and efficiency actions are happening, and DC power conditioning work takes place. But if you note that at P in of minus 8 dB, or when you have an input of minus 8 dBm, you find that the power efficiency matches for both of them. So this is that sweet spot where whatever is the input value you have in the P in, you would have a 17 to 18% efficiency consistently you can reduce. And you can see that the same number is again recovered when you have an input power of close to 3 dBm. So you will find that this sweet spot is available at two places, and it is always great to operate it at the lower side to get better efficiency and better power efficiency. If you look at the power conversion efficiency at 15%, you will see that they are consistently above that, and it is good to make it operate at this value. But what happens when you operate in dual mode, wherein both the paths are turned on? You will see that the power conversion efficiency remains the same, but the input power at which both of them peak is at minus 4 dB. Whereas in the previous graph, you would see one is at minus 5, that is the low power, and the high power is at minus 3. So the impact is in such a way that if you turn on the low power, it impacts the high power path, and some amount of it is pulled back. The peak is pulled back to minus 4 dB. That is 1 dB of input power is pulled back, and you can do the maximum power point available here. So this is the peak power conversion efficiency that you receive in the dual mode. And if you see that majority of the curve is now above 15 degrees. And as I mentioned, the area under the curve is where you will find the most of the activity. So if you look at the area under the curve for this line, it is most beneficial. Or even if you would go to absorb the best case scenario, or the worst case scenario would be about 12% of power conversion efficiency. So this is where it works. And anything and any other setting lower than this would not give you any decent power conversion. But if you were looking at only high power conversion where you want to have maximum power to be retained and you operate in duty cycling mode, then if you can just wait for long enough till the power conversion efficiency is greater than 20% and ensure that it comes within this narrow high functional rectangular area, from there on you can use it for better conversion and better operation. And for that better operation, you need to ensure that the input power is between 4 and 6 dB. So minus 4 and minus 6 dBm. So that shows you need to have close to a milliwatt of power received at its input, or half a milliwatt of power received to its input, so that you can check. So this impacts what is the input that you can look for. And this is directly correspondent using the Freeze formula. It shows that you need to be as close to the power source or the radiation power source to get better energy harvesting. If you are farther away from the power source, means your input power is much lesser, then the time taken to charge for this to get the same performance will be much larger, right? So that is a trade-off that you have to live with regards to distance and total power absorbed. Okay. Now a quick comparison of how this works. So this particular work was done in a 130 nanometer technology, and the operation we did at 900 to 1300. But if you see, the efficiency converts to other frequencies, and depending on what is the maximum output load that you're looking at, we are able to achieve 15 and 26% of efficiency. And the sensitivity, or the minimal value that you need, is actually worse compared to other ones, because the paper number 7 using the 90 nanometer shows that it is up to minus 27 dB it can sense and utilize. The paper number 8 is able to get up to minus 19.3, whereas our work needs much more power operating at minus 14 dBm. But the advantage of these two works done in 130 nanometer are they are dual band and they're able to function at two different bands of operation and generate much more cumulative energy can be harvested from them. Okay, so let me quickly summarize this talk to see what are the directions that we have. So the direction that we have is got is energy harvesting is an exciting research field experiencing continuous advancements, mostly in the signal conditioning and now more so in the power storage and power control loop generation. The micro power barrier has been broken in the research, so that means they are able to go below 1 micro power and operate the control loop and system function and make it work. Extremely careful designs can yield to very interesting results. Some of the results that we have observed and we are going to publish in the future conferences, we see that there are certain combinations and sweet spots. If you can extract and make them operate there, you will really get good efficiency in the signal. The new directions in which people are going are energy aware design techniques and design techniques for operation in power constraint scenarios. Power constraint scenarios could be your remote sensing activities or from remote other places, and these are progressively being applied to CPUs, sensors, radios, etc. If you can see, energy harvesting can have exciting applications in body area network and Internet of Things for smart homes. These energy harvesting systems, rather than just being energy harvesting, they could also be used as energy sensors. That shows that whenever there is some activity around a particular work, it could sense that energy and bring. For example, when you want to do any motion sensing or when you want to do ambient light sensing, each these light sensors which typically want to sense can act like an energy harvester or a power harvester and then inform the Internet of Things or the smart home controller saying there is certain activity around or there is some source that you can harvest or there is some unnecessary source which is present so you can turn it off, and these kind of power aware nature can be brought into your smart homes and also in your body area network where you can look at. Healthcare, fitness apps are great applications for a body area network, and a lot of research work and products are being developed as a matter of convenience within energy harvesting. And I hope you all enjoyed the session of RF energy harvesting, and it was a pleasant ride for me, and I hope you also enjoyed the journey. And right now I will take your questions and await your feedback. I will kindly request you all to share your feedback at this particular website, tiny.cc/feedback, fp_Dr. GSJ, to give feedback on it. Thank you very much. Hope it was a good session and you all liked it. I'll open for questions. I have a nice 25-minute for questions, so I will take up and expect some interactive questions from the participants.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for the session. And now we are open for the questions. Participant, you can ask the questions in the chat box. Sir, I have some questions regarding this energy harvesting. Sir, yes, if the frequency is higher, then the how the reach will be higher? Means in wireless transmission also we have seen that if it is 10 centimeter apart also, then also the power is 1/3. We cannot transmit more than power than 1/3.
That is actually correct. So what is happening is when you're working, and that's why you have to see the freeze formula that extends, right? So whatever is the amount of power that you receive is directly proportional to is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. Yeah. So as you go farther away, your distance will reduce. So that is why we have a factor or a measurement unit called sensitivity. Sensitivity shows minimum input required to make the operation of an energy harvesting or any radio receiver work. So when you get that sensitivity number, that defines what is the maximum input power, and that internally or implicitly or when you can extrapolate that to find out what is the maximum distance that you can operate. So yes, when you want to harvest at higher frequencies, it is tougher, but harvesting at lower frequencies is easier.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, sir. Thank you,
Yeah,
sir. Some questions have came like RF energy harvesting companies working in India, sir.
RF energy, I have not heard many, but I have heard a lot of US based companies and UK based companies. But in India, there are not many who are looking at, because most of the energy harvesting companies are doing it as part of the Internet of Things applications. So that is how they are doing that. We don't explicitly have RF energy companies in India.
Sir, kindly please tell me that what is the name of that company? I just some of the companies that are one or two, any other companies that are available in India, sir.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sir, the names of the energy harvesting companies in India that are currently working. Some of the names, sir, like website link or anything related to
No,
those things.
sure. There are not many companies which specifically work. Most of them work on for example, if you're looking at wireless sensor networks, you would use one of them. There are many people who you could say are from wireless sensor networks, or you would see them from soil management or water management. So energy harvesters, like, see, RF energy harvesting are very, very less. Most of them are working. There's a company called Prodster. Okay. So that Prodster company specifically looks at RF energy harvesting only for wireless sensor networks. That is also, it is ambient sensing. But if you look at overall energy harvesting, where you're looking at photovoltaics, you're looking at piezoelectric, thermals, etc., that is, there you got a lot of companies and lot of MSME supported companies. And this is something that I was looking at implementing in some of the Ghat sections of Karnataka, where we are looking at how we can utilize these harvesting techniques and use sensors to ensure how are the forest activities happening, especially are they getting enough sensor networks, etc. So these are some of the tricks, techniques that we've used. But companies in RF energy harvesting are very, very less. I could say just one or two. If you want, I'll get back the number to you. The question was asked by Amrit.
Okay, sir.
You
Thank
can
you.
sync up with me offline, Amrit. I will let you know the company names.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I think, sir, one more question is there that, sir, how the value of load register was chosen?
See, the load resistor is directly, it's a very simple question. So I need these to operate. For example, when I'm working at an RF energy system, I am looking at extremely low power of operation. And when I'm duty cycling, I'm looking at, say, 1 to 10% only the system has to operate. So the simplest kind of an RF receiver or a transmitter that is working is an on-off keying based transmitter and receiver. That is simplest mode. So I need to know how much current that draws. So if I know that, okay, for example, the amount of current that they draw is about 10 microampere, then the resistance value is given as total output voltage 1 volt divided by 10 microampere. So that would give me what is the resistance. So you are looking at 100 kilo ohms. That would be the load resistor that is chosen. But suppose if you require more current, say for example you need 1 milliampere of current to be discharged at that point of time, we will use 1 kilo ohm resistance, so that you know that that is the only amount of current that is going to get loaded. And that load is directly dependent either with the R and the C value that you use. Hope that answers your question. Maliha Naz. Good question. Yeah. Salma Fauzia. No, nice. Nice to see people from MJCET. Good to know. I did see Professor Kalim Fatima. Good afternoon, madam. Nice to see you that you're here. So, next questions, please. Any other questions that you people might have? Interesting. So I will take feedback as if two things. Either my talk was so simple that everybody understood, or it was so tough that nobody understood.
So, sir,
Yeah.
sir, what is the design consideration for RF thing that any RF harvesting energy companies like what are the design strategies, how we can like on board we can make a chip that will be a real time I know one RF chip that is LoRa. I'm working on that. So sir, like that, if we want to make that, what are the strategies, what are the design that we will be needing to make that thing like that will be made in India and that will be cheap also for that, sir? Any suggestions, sir?
So you want to fabricate a chip?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
See, fabricating a chip means you will have to first understand what is the design. But question is, let me look from the back end of the problem solving. Okay. Now,
Okay, sir.
when you need an RF harvesting chip, right? What is the output voltage and output current you're looking at? You probably look at 1 volt, and you're probably looking at very small amount of battery.
Yes, sir. Yes,
right.
sir. That should be
Right.
very less consuming electricity, because we will be working it as taking into the consideration with IoT that must like take very less energy. Yes, sir.
See, the easiest way to do an energy harvesting circuit is a loop antenna. Okay, that is one where you could do a loop measurement, which is a wireless loop transfer. But if you're doing an RF energy, you have to main thing is this system will work only indoors. Okay, because you're going to use 1.980 800 megahertz. Your transmit and receive station has to be indoors. Okay, or what you could do is your transmit station should communicate to a mobile phone wherever it is. The mobile phone will do the long haul communication. So the problem definition is important. You need to define what is the actual goal. See, thing is, there is no need to use 20,000 euro fabrication process to generate a small ASIC for RF energy harvesting, while you can do it in a very simple diode configuration system on PCB. The single ways you can just select diodes or Zener diodes which are available on the market, stack them in a particular configuration, and you can easily get that. You could build this in a lab in under 20 minutes and test it. That is how simple this is if you do it on a using available components. But if you really want to manufacture a chip and then produce it, the question your investigative agency fund provider will ask is, what is the benefit of this investment? I don't see much benefit of the investment when you can do it. Another thing is, you can use these components and build multiple such sources, and once you build those multiple sources, you can get it out, and you can get some wonderful current control devices. And the target that you can use is, instead of having 1% duty cycle, meaning 99% of the time it is charging and 1% it will be active, you can make this 1% become 20%, where 80% of the time that you are charging and 20% you are able to work. So as you increase the duty cycling time or the on time of the activity, you are increasing the edge computing nature of your system. So this is where it's a great overlap will comes in, where you're doing Internet of Things, edge computing, and power generation, power delivery. When you overlap all these 4 circles of a Venn diagram, that particular sweet spot is where currently you should be working, and join me in working that spot also. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Because the main idea was to ask this question was, sir, because I'm currently working on LoRa. I'm collecting the data from LoRa using the Things Network API. Okay, sir. So I was thinking to fabricate one design that will be very cheap also, because if you will go to buy a LoRa, that will be charged like one LoRa sheet will be of approximately more than 3,000 maybe, I think. So, sir, I was thinking to make a PCB like thing so that we can communicate, although the range will not be that much good if we are making that thing, because the range of the LoRa is very high, and it uses CSS, that chub stack, that is very low data it sends in few KB itself at a single time. Yes, sir. So sir, that's why I was asking. I was thinking to design one like PCB on PCB, that can we make that thing? That's why I asked this question, sir.
PCB definitely is possible, but you need to see is like you exactly pointed out, the data rate and range will be very small.
Yes, sir.
How will you target that distance? For that, you can actually use either antenna boosters or power amplifier circuits by adding 2 or more energy harvested blocks on one. See, when you're building on a PCB, right, you can have 10 power harvesters, energy harvesters on one PCB. You don't need to have just one when you're doing that. So when you're having 10, right, you can use 3 power generated from 3 to a power amplifier, and that you can use to give it out to your block. That will ensure that your range is much higher. Always remember, when you build a custom PCB, you are the liberty, you are the designer. You can keep any number of power harvesters you want. Nobody is going to stop you. And that is the wonderful thing that you can use when you're building on a PCB. That's the best benefit of it.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Nice discussion. This is a good one.
Thanks for the wonderful session, sir. And the best talk in RF energy, because from the morning device, then material, then it circuits, it completes the journey of this emerging trends for RF and micro power.
Okay.
So thank you, sir. Sir, I request you to kindly send 10 questions from your presentation. So for delivering the e-certificate, they have to pass the quiz.
Okay, yeah, I will send it by end of day so that you can share it with them.
Yeah. And this slide, if you can share, it will be better, because for purpose it is new.
So
sir.
sure, no problem. I will share it, and I will also put it up on SlideShare so people can download it also. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir, for giving time for this lecture.
Nice.
I hope the participant have get some knowledge about the RF energy harvesting and recent trends. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks
so
a
much.
lot, sir.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Dr. Majumdar, and it's wonderful having to discuss with all these great people together. Thank you so much.
Sir, one thing, can you please tell us that how many analog and RF companies are currently working in India, so that the participant get to know that what are the coverage,
analog
industry
and RF
coverage
companies. The industry, we have at least about 10 product companies and 10 plus service companies who are working in this area. Both on analog side, RF side, CMOS image sensor side, many. See, for example, I work at Intel. Intel has got digital, RF, analog all together. Then there is Samsung. Samsung has got again digital, RF together. Then you have TI, which does RF, analog, and power. Then you have ST Micro. Then you have LTE, linear technology. Microchip, which again deals with FPGA boards. Then you have Atmel, Altera, plenty of companies, Cypress Semiconductors, the
Thank you, sir.
Onsemi, many.
I
There are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
enough companies in India, and I think Kolkata is going to start with 2-3 companies, if I remember right. So that will be the closest to Meghalaya. People would be working on the VLSI side. Down south in Hyderabad, Bangalore, Kochi, there are a lot of VLSI companies which have come up. Mumbai, Pune are looking at a new spurt of companies. Delhi, Noida are the other sectors where these are available. There are some companies which are coming up in Ahmedabad, where ISRO has got a nice ecosystem. So there are a lot of companies coming up, but the bulk or the majority of the companies in the VLSI domain are in Bangalore and Hyderabad currently, and these are very good companies. So this is just to know there's a good RF spectrum of companies in both analog, digital, RF, packaging, and imaging companies together.
Thanks, sir. I hope the participant get to know, and the attendance of this session will be shortly circulated in this message box. Kindly wait for 5 minutes. Thank you, sir. You can leave, sir.
Thank you so much. It was a great time. Have a great session and have a great week of faculty development program. Bye-bye. Nice talking to you all. Cheers.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.